So we are in week 2 actually, of our Faith and Politics series. And through this series we've been, like I said last week, not trying to change your mind on your political views. That's not the purpose of this series. This series is meant to help you walk through, especially this last lap of the political season, with the character and the truth and the love of God in mind. Right, so that you engage in political conversations and you engage in political wins and political losses with humility and with the character and the love of God. And so this week we're going to talk about the challenge of political polarization. I want to ask you guys a couple of questions, and don't worry, through this series I'm not looking for any responses other than hands raising. There's some series that we walk through where it's like it's not healthy if somebody just starts talking. But who's been caught captive by political conversations that they never wanted to be in? Has anybody ever been caught captive in one of those? Yeah. Who's been blindsided by a forceful person who wanted to impress upon you their views of the world? Who had fun in those moments? Only Mike, because Mike was giving and he was taking, right? Maybe you were the forceful one, who knows? Yeah. But even if you agree with the political position of the person who kind of captures you in those conversations, the intensity, the combativeness, the one-way nature of those conversations is always off-putting. Right? It's never fun. Right? It's never a good thing for the person who gets caught in them. Right, we are deep in the chaotic waters of another political season with just weeks to go, 43 days to be precise until Election Day. And it seems like many dinners and many social events come with this caveat that's often in play anyways. We can talk about anything but religion and politics, right? Which is in essence what our series is based off of, right? But or named after. But these topics are often off limit because people tend to hold to them passionately, unwaveringly, with their conviction. And in their discussions, if they ever begin polite, they often devolve into something less than polite or something that's chaotic. However, our desire to avoid such topics actually reveals more about us than the topics themselves. And I say this not just because it's my job to talk about one of them at the very least, faith, and then also how it connects with politics and all of everyday life, but because we as followers of Jesus should be able to engage in both conversations on both topics humbly, healthily, constructively, and with respectful conversations, even with people who vastly disagree with us. Right? As Christians, we should be able to have respectful and healthy and humble conversations with people who vastly disagree with us. So in this sermon today, we're going to talk about, one, the importance of unity in the body of Christ. I think that's, if we at least unify ourselves around God's purposes, and together as the church, it will help us have a healthy way to step into these conversations. But two, a strategy for respectful dialogue and understanding differing viewpoints. And then three, the role of empathy and love and overcoming divisions that do sprout up. And so first, let's talk about the importance of unity in the body of Christ. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but God desires the church to be unified. He desires for God's people who believe to be unified. Right? God created us for a good and perfect and joyful union with Him, with our Father in heaven. And then because we had that perfect and joyful union with Him, that we could have a perfect and joyful union with each other. And in Scriptures, the only time that division happens is because of sin, a diversion from God's perfect plan, a departing from God's perfect plan. And part of God coming into this world through the person and work of Jesus Christ was to put an end to the work of sin, and therefore start to unify God's people back together again. And in the process of doing that, to unify all people to Himself and to each other. In fact, that's the vision of the Scriptures. That's the vision of God's final act of this current age is to bring every tribe and every tongue and every nation together that were very separated in this world into one people gathered around the throne of God. And what an amazing day that will be, right? When we stand before God and there with us are people who held vastly different views of this world, vastly different views of life, views that were often at odds with each other, right? That will be standing around the throne of God with people who killed each other in wars, but who had faith in the one true God. Right, we'll be standing there before our Maker and our Redeemer with people who live vastly different lives in drastically different cultures, with separate languages, with separate body types and shapes, with different skin shades, with separate, different and distinct clothings and values, all unified around the throne of God as one race, as one nation, as one people belonging to God. All right, this is a scripture in Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, when the Apostle John says, "As I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne of God and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb.'" How we live today and how we interact with people who live differently than us and who believe differently from us should reflect our belief that day is coming for us. That one day, if they're in Jesus Christ, just as we are, if they put their faith in Jesus Christ, that they will be standing there next to us. Even if they didn't understand the world as we understand them. Even if they didn't understand what the world needs now as we think that we do. Even if they think that someone else should be in charge of our country and different rules should be in place for us than we do. If we believe and trust that one day we will stand before the throne with them, it will bring us to a better place when we talk to them now about the things that we disagree with them when it comes to our politics. See, if we remember that day, we will engage with them with greater character and compassion and kindness than we would otherwise. And we would engage with them as brothers and sisters who will share a future with us, or brothers and sisters who don't yet know who they are because they've forgotten it in the midst of the confusion of this world. And we want to interact with them in such a way that they come to remember who they are and come to trust in the same Father that we know and the same big brother Jesus who has done the work to save us all. In fact, on the night in which Jesus was betrayed, all right, remember John, he spreads it out on 3 chapters and all sorts of dialogues in John that isn't in the other Gospels. And in John, Jesus shares his high priestly prayer. And in that, in John 17, verse 20, he says, I do not ask for these only, the disciples who were with him, but also for those who will believe in me through their word. By the way, this is the only time in Scriptures that Jesus prays for you personally, because he's talking about you and me. Because we have believed through the word of the apostles, Jesus prayed for you here in Scriptures. He says that they may all be one. Just, excuse me. That was unexpected. I apologize. Anyone want to see a bug fly in my throat? That's what it felt like. Oh my goodness. All right. Let's read that passage over again, shall we? Jesus says, I do not ask for these only, but for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may be one, just as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. Do you see that? Jesus says when the church is unified, the world will believe the message of Jesus Christ. We got to unify around the grace and the truth of God. God's desire is that we be unified with one another in the church, but not just in unity, but in perfect unity, that we may be one. And I understand that this is hard and maybe an impossible goal to work towards, because either you'll have to disregard our sometimes very big differences to say that we're unified. And there's many in the Christian church who have done that. And they say, oh yeah, we're just unified. But what they do is they minimize the differences and they minimize any understanding of sin so that they can say, kumbaya. Right? We all just belong to one another, but they don't have any real unity. Or you have to deal with a much, much smaller group of people who can all consent to the right doctrines and right beliefs on faith and politics. Right, and traditionally we have done the second one in the LCMS. We've said we're just going to narrow down who we can be in fellowship with so that we can make sure everyone believes everything that we believe. Right? And the ELCA has done that first one to say we're just going to say we're unified with anybody and everybody. We're just going to say I'm cool and you're cool. And it doesn't matter what we believe, and faith and doctrine isn't even going to come into the picture. And you see the very slippery slope of that. But it's also a slippery slope to say we can only just be unified with such a small group of people who agree with us. I believe that there's a unity that we can have that doesn't minimize our commitment to the truth and to following God's ways, and nor does it so narrowly define what we need for unity that we can't be united to pretty much anyone. And that model is Jesus himself, who came in grace and truth. Right? Jesus didn't come solely in grace, did he? He didn't say, I accept anyone and every one of you, however you want to live, whatever you want to do, whether you honor me or you despise me, whether you revere me or whether you mock me, whether you follow my ways or proudly make my own way, your own way, it doesn't matter, I accept you. Jesus doesn't say that. And there are churches who have said God is just a God of love, and they don't share a truth beyond the call to love that we find in Scriptures. And those churches have lost all of their history. They've lost all of their integrity. They've lost any semblance of the faith that was passed on to them by their forefathers, handed down from the apostles. They've lost the truth of God, and therefore they've lost the salvation of God. Jesus did not come solely in grace. And if you fall into that mindset, you will live a peaceable life with others, but you will also ultimately compromise the truth of God and hide it from those who need the truth of God for their lives and for their salvation. And if you live that way, you'll have a good chance of losing your salvation too. If you say God came just in grace. Because Jesus also came in truth. And we can never forget that. Yet truth is like a rock that we can stand upon, that can give us stability and strength, but it's also something that's hard and inflexible and difficult to encounter without being bruised or even crushed. And churches that depend and focus solely on the truth have clear lines that you must cross over before you can feel accepted. Clear lines that if you haven't crossed, you're the outsider. You're one to be suspicious of, and you might even be the enemy. And so if you swing too far towards truth at the exclusion of grace, you can know the reality of who God is and the salvation that He has promised, but you might miss out on it yourself. Because you might become like the Pharisee, who knew all the rules and became self-deluded into thinking that they could follow them perfectly and earn their way into God's grace just from their knowledge of the truth, or just from their supposed being able to live out that truth, though you have to lie to yourself if you think that you live out the truth of God to the fullest. You have to sacrifice the truth. It's a much smaller bit of truth that you have to tell yourself, I've done this, so God must accept me. Jesus came in both grace and truth, and our churches should reflect that, and we as individuals in His church should reflect that as well. We should be unified in our commitment to the truth of God. A truth that we can strive for, a truth that we can work towards, but a truth that we can all confess that we can only partially live up to, only imperfectly follow, as much as we desire. But we should be committed in our desire to strive towards that truth, to live in line with that truth, and to make it our goal. Yet we should also be unified in our commitment to grace, to be people who have patience with others as they grow and they learn. Just as we've needed patience so many times throughout our lives as we've learned and as we've grown into the places that we are at today. And chances are we still need a lot of grace and truth today, don't we? I know I do. Every day. I need God's grace, and I need the grace of others as well as I seek to live in the truth of God. And when we bear with each other in grace and truth, it positions us to be people who can have conversations with others who do not believe the truth as we believe it, who believe part of it or none of it, or believe a falsehood in the place of the truth. Right? We can share the truth in graceful and compassionate ways. And we can have patience with those who struggle to trust the truth and believe it. We can have grace for them. But we can share the truth at the same time that they need to make the informed decisions that they need to make. And so it's important for us as a church to be unified in the grace and the truth of God. But second point that I want to make is we need strategies for respectful dialogue and for understanding differing viewpoints. Ephesians 4, chapter 1 through 6, Paul says, I therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. Isn't that a high calling? Walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called. And how do we do that? With all humility, with gentleness, and with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you've been called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And you see God's desire for our unity. You hear one over and over again. God wants His church to be one, just as Jesus is one with the Father. And He wants us to be one with Him. And you know why? Because He wants good for you. He wants life for you. He wants joy for you. And that can only be found in the presence of God. But even more so, He wants those things for the world that's disunified in their relationship with God. He wants them unified with Him through you. And that can only happen as we live in the grace and the truth of God. And we share the truth of God in a lens of love, through the lens of love. Because that's what Jesus did for you. He loved you. He served you. He met you where you were at. He accepted you where you were at the beginning of your faith walk. And He invited you to walk by His side. He invited you to walk in newness of life. And ever since you started believing in Jesus Christ, leaning into His grace and His truth, He's been walking by your side on your journey of change. He's been helping you grow in your knowledge of the truth and the love of God in Christ Jesus. And you're therefore urged to live your life in light of that same calling. In light of God's humble, barrier-breaking love for you. He wants you to live your life in light of that. You're called to take up the same posture of Jesus Christ, sharing the truth of God, but doing so in the love of God, with all humility and gentleness and patience. And that means when you talk to somebody who doesn't believe quite like you believe, the Christian faith, or you talk to somebody who doesn't have quite the politic that you have, or who has a vastly different politic than you have, you don't come to them as someone who, I know it, I know the truth, why don't you, you big dummy? Because that tends to be the way that you talk to people with politics, don't you? Because that's the way that we see the politics that we hold. I've got it and you don't. I'm smart. You must be something less. We engage in politics that way, and we forget that all that God had to do to train us and to grow us up into the people that we are of faith already. Right? He had to have so much compassion on us, so much patience for us, so much forgiveness for us. As we learned and we took steps forward, and as we stumbled, as we fell, as we were walking following Him, and then said, oh, what's that? Maybe I'll follow that instead. over and over again throughout our lives, God had to have patience. He didn't demand that we get it from the get-go. And we shouldn't demand that someone understand the world as we understand it now. From our first conversation, or even from our 10th conversation. Most of us, it took us a long time to get to the worldview that we have. And so we should have patience with others as we dialogue with them and talk to them and try to help them understand why we view the world the way we do and why we think one political solution or one political candidate is our answer. Because it probably took us a long time to get to that point, right? So I want to share with you kind of five ways of helping you have constructive and respectful dialogue. And dialogue with ways that you can understand another's viewpoint. And I'm going to use the acronym LASSO, L-A-S-S-O. If you like taking notes, you might just want to write down LASSO, because each of them start with that. If I was ahead of the game, I would have had it up on the screens, but Michelle needed my sermon way too early this week, since she wasn't going to be here. But the L in LASSO is listen to understand. Right? When you have engagements with others, listen to understand. Right? Allow the other person to speak and fully express their beliefs, and resist the urging to just wait for your turn to speak. Right? Because a lot of times when we're listening to people, we're just waiting for our opportunity to jump in there. Right? They're talking, they're flapping their gums, and you want to silence them and just tell them what's up. Right? Who's been that way with a conversation before? Probably all of us. Right? When we do that, we're not listening to understand. We're listening for an opportunity to jump in. And you'll never grow in your understanding of others in the world if you listen that way. Right? Resist the urge and wait your turn to speak. Instead, reflect back what you've heard. Right? When someone shares their viewpoint, just say, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, Z. Is that what you're saying? And they have a chance to say, yeah, that's exactly it. And you know what? They're happy because they feel heard. And because they feel heard, they feel valued. And they feel respected. They might even feel loved. Which allows them to hear from you. All the more so, right? But it also might give them an opportunity to say, no, that's not what I was saying at all. And then you have an opportunity to learn. Because maybe you've been listening to them for years talking about some sort of position, and you've kind of tuned them out because you know that they're broken record, they always say the same thing, or you just assume because of what they've already started saying, you know where they're going to end. And if you echo back to them what you think that you heard from them, and they say, that's not what I was saying, suddenly you can listen to them with new ears. And you can truly maybe understand them for the first time. Understand their heart at least, for why they vote the way they do, why they believe what they believe, why they hold to the positions that they do. And now you're in a position to actually speak to the issue at hand. And even more so, speak to the heart aches and the worries and the fears of the heart. More so than just the position. So one, listen to understanding. The second one, the A of LASSO, is acknowledge the common ground. Right? As you're listening to somebody, highlight the areas that you agree with them on. And if you do so, it will build some mutual respect. Right? Suddenly that person that believes differently than you is not just an idiot who sees the world wrongly, But you see that, man, there are some things that they want in the world that align with what I want in the world, things that are good, and they just see a different way of getting there. And you can see the good in them rather than just the bad. Right? And if you acknowledge the good that you see in them, it builds some trust. Right? It builds some trust with them. I like to say, man, I like that. That really reminds me of Jesus. When I'm talking to somebody who disagrees with me. And if there's something in what they're saying, something that in the way that they're expressing the things that they think are important of life, about life, I like saying that reminds me of Jesus. When he did this, when he showed compassion for this person, when he accepted this person who lived a lifetime of sin, and he didn't say, clean up your act before I can accept you. Get everything right before you can come into my presence. He just said, come in, I'm going to love you, and my grace is going to change you. Go and sin no more afterwards. Or I love the way that he called this person to truth when they were out of line. What you just did reminded me of Jesus. And even if they don't believe in Jesus, they're going to say, oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Because even if they don't believe in Jesus, they respect Jesus. And they know that Jesus is such a highly honored figure in our society, even by unbelievers, that they will say, wow, this person really respects me. And they know Jesus, they love Jesus, and they said something about me reminds me of him. And suddenly they're open to hearing from you because you've honored something in them. And you see something in them that reminds you of the one that you honor above all. So listen to understand, acknowledge, common ground, and the first S is stay open to learning. Stay open to learning. Right? When you have conversations, say a little prayer as you enter in, Lord, teach me. I know this is a flaming liberal I'm talking to. I know this is a hard-nosed conservative that I'm talking to. Whatever it is. But stay open to learning. And say there might be something here that I might not have considered before. Let me hear it, Lord. Balance my understanding. And you'll be amazed by how well that changes your posture in political conversations. Right? Even if you listen to their conversation and you didn't learn anything new about them or about the position they're espousing, you've listened with a humble heart, with the intention to learn if there was something there. And you will engage with that person in a better way. In Micah chapter 6, verse 8, God says, He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. Walk humbly with your God. And if you're going to walk humbly with your God, you must walk humbly with others. Because our relationship with God might be vertical, but our relationship with God is always lived out in the horizontal. Right? So we have to walk humbly with others. And when we stay open to learning, not locked in our ways, we show that we're willing for God to teach us, even through the person that we vehemently disagree with on 90% of the issue. We can learn something about ourselves or the world or about them as we listen to them humbly. So listen to understand, acknowledge common ground, stay open to learning, and the second S is speak with care. Right? Avoid inflammatory language like name calling or harsh labels that just shut down discussions. Rather, focus on presenting your perspective thoughtfully, reflecting God's truth without resorting to shaming others. So reflecting His truth and His love. Right, Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 through 6 says, walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. And this is not just talking about religious conversations. This is talking about all conversations with those outside of the faith. To walk in wisdom when you're walking with them, when you're talking with them. To speak humbly and graciously, allowing your conversation, your words to be seasoned with the gospel, with the Spirit of God, with the leading of His Spirit to speak with grace and truth in ways that will make others taste and see that the Lord is good by the way that we speak. Right? Our conversations with others, especially when we're sharing the gospel, but when we're talking about anything, our language, our tone, and our posture should reflect the truth that we believe in a God who made us all, who made every single person in the image of God, who wants none to be lost, but all to be saved. And that should be reflected in the way that we speak and in the way that we honor the person that we even disagree with. And you might not win them over to your position immediately, but you'll put a rock in their shoe. Right? They can't ignore. Right? That's the truth of a rock in your shoe, right? You get a pebble in your shoe, you can't ignore it. Your mind's on it. You might even be able to walk without hindrance, and you're like, yep, it's there. Yep, it's there. You will put a rock in their shoe emotionally, spiritually. And they'll say, there was something different about them. There was something different about the way that they shared their position. There was something different about the way that they disagreed with me. There was something different about the way that they talked about Jesus, or the way that I saw them live it out. And they won't be able to ignore it. I think that's what the scriptures mean when it says it's like putting burning ashes on an unbeliever's head by the way that you show kindness to them. Right? You can't ignore your hair catching on fire. And you're like, oh, okay. That didn't happen to me. That's not why I'm missing all my hair, by the way. But they can't ignore and dismiss your views or your faith when you interact with people in the way that Jesus has called us to. And so the last one in lasso is the O. Right, to offer prayer for God's blessing. Right, that person you disagree with. Right, don't just end the conversation by sharing care, but maybe share a prayer. And even just, you might even just pray for them as you walk away from them. Lord, help them. Lord, bless them. Right, have you ever done that by somebody who's hurt you or who's disagreed with you? It changes you. You're just not walking away grumbling, I can't believe that person's such a jerk. They're so blind. They're always going to be that way. But you walk away and you say, Lord, would you bless them? Would you take care of their needs? Would you comfort their heart and their soul? Would you minister to their doubts and their disbeliefs? Would you give them the prosperity of life that they need to trust you? Would you give them even the difficult days of life that is needed to trust you? Would you take care of them as a father? Suddenly you're not walking away from an enemy, you're walking away from a brother. And even in that moment that you've disagreed, be like, hey, I know that we've disagreed on this. We haven't come to a place of agreement. But can I pray for you? And I'm not going to say a prayer for that you get the way that I get it. But I just want to pray. I want to bless you. I want to pray that God blesses you. Man, if we did that as Christians with those who disagreed with us, do you think that would change people's lives? It would. Do you think it would change maybe the way people see us as a church? Hey, we disagree with you, but man, I want to bless you. I want to pray for good things for you. What do you need help with? I want to pray for you, and oh yeah, by the way, maybe me and my church friends could help you with that. Man, it would win people over. And you have somebody who sees life so differently from you. They see you as an enemy. And you're walking away from your disagreement on how the world should work, on what politics should be in place, on who should rule us. And you walk away saying, yeah, but what tangible needs do you have? And how can I pray for you? And how can I serve you? I disagree with you in every way of life almost, but I'm willing to come over to your house and help you with that project. Man, it would radically change them. It would radically change the view of your politic. And even more importantly, it would radically change their view of your God, of your faith. And they might be open to the faith for the very first time. In fact, I guarantee you, they will become more open to the faith because they will smell something of Jesus on you. They will get a taste of Jesus in you. And they'll hunger for more. And so we've talked about the importance of unity in church, strategies for respectful dialogue and understanding differing opinions. And then thirdly, the role of empathy and love in overcoming division. And I think maybe I've already touched upon this. We'll just jump down to the Bible verse I have here. Philippians chapter 2, 3 through 4 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Count everyone as more significant than yourself. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. Right? Can you live that way when it comes to your politics? Not on your own. But through Jesus you can. Through the Spirit you can. And if you have empathy over their hurts, if you have an understanding for what drives them to vote the way that they do, you'll understand them. And that will lead you to love them and have compassion for them and want the best for them, even if they're looking for all the wrong solutions to sometimes the wrong problems even, as we tend to do in American politics, probably any politics. But it will lead you to love them. And when you love someone, it's hard for them to see you as an enemy. It's hard for them to see you as the ignorant Neanderthal, because those kind of people don't love and serve others. But here you are loving and serving them. Why does Paul urge us to live this way? Because that's how Jesus approached us. And when Jesus came to this earth, he approached people who believed vastly different than he did, right? He came as the light of the world to a world living in darkness. That's what we are apart from Jesus Christ. We were the political enemy and adversary to Jesus Christ. We were the ones who didn't know what we were doing, but were rock solid confident in our path. Yet Jesus came as the light of the world in grace and in truth. And it won us over, didn't it? At least for those of us in this room who have come to faith in Jesus Christ, and those of us who haven't come to faith in the grace and truth of Jesus Christ, I know it's calling to you today. I know that's why you're here. Because you don't believe yet, but you keep getting a whiff of His beauty. You keep seeing glimpses of His truth. You keep recognizing the warmth of His love, and you think there might be something there. Keep believing that, because there is something there. Open yourself up to it, because He is the embodiment of everything that your heart desires. He's the embodiment of everything that you need. He came to people who didn't believe as He believed, who didn't love as He loved, and He emptied Himself. He chose not to control others' thoughts and minds. Rather, He had a compassion on us because we were like sheep without a shepherd, wandering into every kind of danger. We were like infants tossed to and fro by the winds of every doctrine of this world, by every idea under the sun, because we weren't grounded in the truth, in His truth, and we were languishing, and we were hurting ourselves and others, and we were dying because of it. Yet Jesus came into this world as the way, the truth, and the life to rescue us out of the sea of chaos that we had entered into. To show us that there was a way out of this crazy walk of life. To show us that there was solid ground that we could stand upon. And He came into this world to carry all of our sorrows. The consequences of all of us wandering away from the truth of God. And He came with His truth to rein us in from all the wild ways that we've walked down because we just wanted to live in freedom and grace. And Jesus did this not out of selfishness, but out of love, seeking our good. For in joining us into this world, He guaranteed that He would die for us. And that very truth helped us to trust God, to believe in Him. Because He knows what our lives are like. He knows how hard it is. And yet He shows compassion for us. Likewise, if you show empathy, if you show love and compassion towards those whom you disagree with in politics, it will help you live peaceful lives with them here and now. It'll help you have peace with them. But it might just help them find peace with God as well. This world is full of division, especially in politics, but our faith equips us to overcome that division. Let us be unified, engaged in respectful dialogue, and let us show empathy and love for all, extending the grace and the truth of God, which God has extended to us. Amen.